Lead Well, Live Whole, the podcast where leadership meets life. Your host, Michael Sirmon, is here to help you rise above the noise, lead with purpose, and live with clarity. Let's get to it.
Welcome back to the Lead Well, Live Whole podcast, and I'm your host, Michael Sirmon. And today, we're going to talk about one of the most underestimated, yet life-giving practices of strong leadership, accountability. I know, accountability is typically a four-letter word, but today, we're not going to talk about the kind that feels forced or shame-based. We're talking about the kind that builds your character, protects your consistency, and calls you up, not just out. Here's our big truth for today. No one stays consistent in isolation. If you want to live whole and lead well, you need people who won't just cheer you on, but challenge you forward. So let's dig into what accountability really is and what it's not, and then how to invite the kind of voices that will refine you, not define you. There's a myth of self-reliance, but the reality is leadership naturally can feel lonely, but that doesn't mean it's isolated, right? They're not synonymous. There's a dangerous lie that is prevalent in the leadership community that says that as you rise in responsibility, that you should be able to handle everything on your own, that no one should be able to see you struggle, and that if you ask for help, you're going to look weak. That kind of mindset leads to burnout, leads to disconnection, and eventually people begin to compromise. The reality is we don't grow in a vacuum. We grow in a community. We grow when we're challenged, when we're faced with honesty and truth is spoken to us in love. If you think about it, Jesus had Peter, James, and John in his inner circle. David had Nathan. Paul had Barnabas. Who do you have? I have a couple Tims in my life. One is a great friend. The other's my brother. I also have a good wife who's good at holding me accountable. But I've got another really good friend that I've been in ministry with for years named Kevin. Kevin is really good at the accountability piece. And in fact, there's lessons I learned from him early. I'm talking 30 years ago or earlier that are still guiding principles in my life. They were painful at the time, but they were true. And he didn't speak them to me to hurt me. He spoke them to me to build me. And actually, he spoke them to me in response to my question. And over the years, what I've had to learn is that I'm not real good at holding myself accountable. I'm real good at justifying why I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm looking at my intent. I'm looking at what I wanted to do instead of what I actually did, what I actually said, how I actually responded. And the good friend, Tim, he's great at editing my papers, presentations. He's good at calling me out on them. But he's also a good guy that in love, he can respond to me when I say something. And it normally comes off as something like, really? Is that the way you meant that to come out? And it's just enough to check me. It's just enough to hold me accountable when I'm not holding myself accountable. Because I can be a strong personality and I can be forceful when I'm passionate about something, just as we all can. And it's easy to steamroll over people. You need strong people in your circle. You need people as strong as you are, people that you trust. That if they have a knife, that knife is to excise something and not to hurt you and not to stab you. But what exactly is accountability and what is it not? Accountability is not about micromanagement. It's about mentorship. It's not about control. It's always about alignment. For me, and for most of the healthy leadership world, accountability is a safe place to be honest about our struggles. We get into rooms and we talk about vulnerability and we want to share the personal things and we want to pretend that that's going to build some kind of trust and some kind of bond between the team. But the reality is the safe space we need is so that when we talk about our struggles, when we can't figure out how to get a project across the line, when we can't figure out how to get the resources in place, or when I just can't wrap my head around a concept, that safe space is where I can bring that forward and know I'm not going to be judged. I'm not going to be derided. I'm not going to be mocked. I'm not going to be ridiculed any more than guys do it amongst themselves anyway. But it's going to be taken, and I can trust that team to give me honest feedback. If I have a mentor, I could trust that mentor to give me honest feedback. Some of the toughest and the best mentors I've had have been the toughest mentors. They've been honest. They've been brutal sometimes, because sometimes that brutality is what it takes for me to get through especially when my mind is set on a path, or my mind is set on a certain answer. But as you begin to ask the questions, and as you begin to push back on each other, it becomes easier, because that real accountability, it provides a sounding board for decisions and direction. We often want to try to hash all this out in our minds and then just kind of lay it out. But the reality is there's a lot of value in debate. There's a lot of value in sounding off ideas, or just brainstorming, that running brainstorm with someone or with a group of people as you're trying to come to a decision or trying to work out a direction. And the best sounding boards will bring those things to you that you don't think about. So what I like doing is, when I come in front of my group, when I come in front of the individuals that I'm looking to sound something off of, or wanting to bounce a decision off of, one of the first things that I will ask them is to tell me where this path, tell me where this decision, this plan is going to fail. Let me know the weak spots. Let me know the things that are going to cause it to not be successful down the road. And I give them permission up front to bring that in, right? I'm not looking for nitpicking, right? I don't care if I have this, especially at any stage, if I have the same font across the different pages or something like that. But I do want to know where I've stubbed my toe, or when I've left out a vital point, or when I've said something that just wasn't quite true in it, right? I need that kind of feedback. That feedback has to be a mirror that reflects truth and not just approval. If all you're looking for is people who are going to say yes, and people are going to agree with you, and people are going to clap you on the back, and are going to applaud you, and just schmooze you all day long, they're not making you stronger. They're not making you better. In fact, if you're that weak of a leader that you have to surround yourself with yes people, then I doubt that your organizations or your teams can be as effective as they would be if you would surround yourself with people who would hold you accountable. I remember I was in a role, and it was a very tough time in the environment, and I was at executive level role, and I was with the CEO, and we were talking, and he had a plan that he wanted to run forward, and I began to talk to him about the areas where the plan was going to fail, right? And while short term it may give what you want, but long term this is going to be the impact. This is going to be the effect of that, and the recovery would not be able to be made in time to capture whatever the market was whenever it was springing back, because we have to have a very quick recovery time. And he looked at me and he said, "That's not what I want. What I want is for you to tell me how this is going to work." Well, I can't do that, right? I can't just approve it. I have to be honest. Now, eventually, he did circle back around and let me know that I was not a team player, and that I was being negative toward his ideas. And we had to come to an agreement on that, because that wasn't the truth. I want to support. In fact, we talked about it last episode. I want to say yes, and I want to make it happen, right? I want to be the solution to the problem. But at the same time, if I'm in a role, and if I'm in that position, and if I'm called upon for feedback or for advice, I have to be honest, and I have to speak it in truth, and I have to speak it with wisdom, just as each and every one of you do. And I don't care if it's your children, or your spouse, or your boss, or your team, or even yourself. That mirror has to reflect truth. And the people you surround yourself with, the environment you put yourself in, is the mirror that reflects who you are. We can say we don't lie, cheat, or steal, but we surround ourselves with a team that lies, cheats, and steals in our name. That's the same as us doing it. Now, what accountability also is, it's a guardrail. It's a guardrail that keeps us from crashing into blind spots, because we all have them. I don't care how good you are, how smart you are, how experienced you are, how much money you have, or how many titles you've had. You've got blind spots. And those blind spots are based on our experiences, our biases, our perceptions. I mean, I was talking to a new director one time, and he was really struggling to connect with his team on the production floor, because he came from a well-to-do family. He did not know what it was like to need the overtime. He didn't know what it was like to live from paycheck to paycheck. So he knew he had that blind spot, and he worked hard to try to understand that. But until he came to the awareness, he was making decisions that was impacting people and causing them to pull back, and they were taking it personal, and they were responding as though it was personal, and it hindered his effectiveness as a leader. Now, because he cared and because he wanted to be the good leader, once he understood the blind spot, he worked hard to get it cleared up. He worked hard to develop the empathy and understanding in that area. But it took him having a team around him to talk to him and give him the feedback to open that up, that never would have happened had he not had people who would be honest with him. Now, here is what accountability is not. Accountability is not a trap for guilt. If you live for the aha moment, then you're not truly holding somebody accountable. If somebody you work for, somebody you're with, somebody who's on your team, if all they do is try to set traps so they can show how you failed or show how you've fallen, and their intent and their motive is not right, that is not accountability. That is not healthy. That's a toxic culture. I recently left a company because it had that exact same culture in it. Accountability, it's not a performance scorecard. I cannot be honest with you and tell you where I'm struggling. You can't be honest and tell me where you're struggling if I'm going to pull that up on you every time there's a performance review, every time I'm wanting to judge how you're doing. In fact, it takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of character for someone to step up and say, hey, I understand that I'm the director of this, or I'm the VP of that, or even I'm the CEO of this. And I can't figure out the path from here to there, and then pull together the team together. Because if you've been around me for very long, you've heard me say time and time and time again, none of us sees as well as all of us, and none of us are as smart as all of us. Nobody has all the answers. I don't care if you have an advanced engineering degree and you think that you're God's gift to the world. You do not have all the answers. I don't care if you have a PhD. You may be very smart in your profession and your niche, but at the end of the day, there are people out there that know what you need to know. And if you don't open yourself to them, and if you don't get yourself out of judging them for not being where you are at whatever area you're looking into, then you're never going to get that feedback and that input from them. Above all, accountability is not public shaming. I had a CEO that loved doing that. He loved when you failed. He loved pulling it out in front of the entire group. He loved trying to ridicule you and make you look small or feel small, because it would somehow make him feel more powerful, make him feel stronger or more complete. That's just a sign of a weak individual. That's a sign of somebody who's broken, the sign of somebody who is injured and hurt and has never learned how to grow up and really be part of a heavily or a healthily functioning team. And that's not a slam on them. It's an opportunity for that individual, opportunity for all of us to understand that we're all broken in some way. And it's how we manage that brokenness that allows it to heal and allows us to grow up and allows us to become more emotionally aware of what we're doing. Because If we as leaders feel we have to sit around and brag about what we have and brag about what we've done and everything, we have to one up everybody that's around us. That is not a response that's based on health. That's not a response that's based on strength. That's based on a sense of inferiority. That's based on insecurity. That's based on that hurt that's inside of you that has to be fixed. Healthy accountability isn't about catching you slipping. It's about helping you stand. Remember, it's about refining you, not defining you. It's about us all growing, getting better, decision by decision, day by day, action by action, and pushing the envelope at times, which means if we're pushing it, we're going to fail and we're going to stumble and we're going to fall. And we have to create the environment so people can do that safely. Because if they can't do it safely, they're going to quit pushing. If we can't do it safely, we're going to quit pushing and we're going to back up and we're going to quit. We're going to quit giving all discretionary effort. And that's bad for all of us. So why do we need, I know I've kind of ran into it already, but why do we need accountability? Even when everything seems perfectly fine, why do we need it? Here's the thing. You don't wait to invite accountability after you've messed up. You build that trust before the crisis. When everything is going well, when everything is going great, what's our risk? Our risk is that's when ego is going to grow. And when ego begins to grow, that's when we begin to isolate. Because ego loves isolation. Ego can't handle being compared to anyone. Ego can't stand having anyone around it that may know as much or know more, that may look different or may look better or may perform better or may get a better word of applause or might get a clap on the back when ego thinks they should have it. Ego, it knows everything. Ego out of control is God's gift to whatever the operation is. And it doesn't matter about your degree. It doesn't matter about your experience. It doesn't matter about your relationships. It doesn't matter at all. When ego starts growing, it will grow in every one of us. So, to avoid that, we build an accountability cycle. We build an accountability circle with our trusted advisors, with our peers, with our companions, right? It can't be with everybody. Right? You not everybody's going to have that same level of access to you. And I don't care if you're sweeping the floor, cleaning the parking lot, or running the board. Everybody will not have that same access to you. They may feel like they do, and they may feel very familiar, but they do not and cannot and should not have that level of access. There has to be some that have your inner circle that can come to you and say, hey, you're stumbling right here. You're missing the boat on this. You've missed the mark right here. Right? And these are the ones that when they catch you walking around with your fly unzipped, are going to quietly tell you your fly's unzipped. When they see something hanging out of your nose or on your face, they're going to say, hey, you got something hanging off your face. These are the kinds of people you need. They're more than a friend. They're much more than a friend. We need people in our life who can come to us and say, hey, you're drifting. Or that tone was off. Did you mean to be a smart aleck when you said that? Did you mean to use sarcasm? Or you've been unusually distant today. Is everything okay? What's going on with you? Why are you pulling away? Right? That kind of thing. Because I know me personally, there's times, especially when I'm super stressed, that when I feel like I'm being pushed away or when I feel like I'm being excluded where I shouldn't be, my natural response, which is most of our responses, is to pull back in and just hyper focus on the things that I can control, which means I pull away from those other things that I need to be involved in. A good friend of mine named Frank told me years ago, in fact, he has his own consulting group, but he told me years ago when we were working and some things were going on and I began to pull away, he came and he said, hey, Just remember this. No one can make you a victim unless you allow them to. No one can make you a victim unless you allow them to. They only have the power over you that you give them. And for years now, I bring that up over and over again to people and to myself, right? When I feel like pulling away, I say, wait, no, I have a responsibility. I have a voice here. I have input. And I hold myself above that victim mentality. One of my favorite, and my buddy Tim, he likes throwing this one at me, said, hey, you said you'd prioritize rest. Why are you burning out again? Why are you pushing out? Why aren't you taking some time off? And what's funny about it is because Tim is the guy who won't take any time off. He has as much problem disconnecting as I have. And I try to hold him accountable to the same thing. But we had to work out that relationship with each other, right? Because these things, they don't come out of judgment. They come out of love. They don't come to pull us off course, but they come to help us bring us back into alignment. They don't come to attack us. They actually come to protect us. Protect us from ourselves. Protect us from going off course. Protect us from that cliff that we can't see, that trap that we can't see. Because accountability doesn't restrict us. It refines us. So let me say this very, very clearly, and I don't care who you are. Listen up. You don't need a crowd. You need a circle. If your ego needs a crowd, then you need to begin to trim your ego. You need an inner circle. You need some people that will sharpen you, that will refine you. In fact, I was talking to a friend today, one of my mentors. His name is Scott Pryor, right? He and his family own Pryor Aerospace in Tulsa. I used to work for him. And as we were chatting back and forth via text, that was one of the things that he reminded me of. Iron sharpens iron. And I love it, right? Because I know that. But there's times you need that reminder. And that's what your inner circle will do for you. These are the few trusted people who know the real you. Because not everybody can know the real you. Shakespeare said the whole world is a stage and we are but players thereupon. Right? We're different things in the different roles we have. But there's a real us. There's a kernel there that is the core of who we are. And those trusted, that inner circle, that trusted few, they know the real us. They know when we're hurting. They know when we're celebrating. They know what we need long before we know it. And in fact, you will know these people because you can be separated from them for years. And when you're back together, it's like you were never separated, like you had just talked the hour before. These people, they're not impressed by titles. You may be the CEO of whoever, of Halliburton or the President of the United States or something, and they could care less. They're going to have that same conversation with you as though you were the guy who was just helping them take the trash out. These are the true few who will tell you the truth gently but firmly in a way that you could hear it and not just assume you heard it. These are those few who believe in your future even when you're discouraged. See, my wife does that for me. She can't be the only one in my inner circle, but she does this for me. When I'm discouraged, when I need to hear that truth, she is that voice. She is there a lot of times, just as those friends I mentioned earlier are. And those voices come at the time when I need it because they know me often better than I know myself. Your inner core, that inner circle, they can be a mentor. They can be a friend who walks with the same values that you walk. They can be a coach or a spiritual leader, and it can be your spouse. But the relationship has to be emotionally safe and honest for it to be your spouse, for it to be someone that close to you. Right, so I have my wife and my brother, they're both within my inner circle. Keep in mind, you don't need a lot of voices, but you need to have the right voices. And you have to consciously give them permission. I talked about it a few episodes back, about having to pull my team together and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. I need I'm giving you permission to call me out. Or your inner core needs a deeper commitment than that. They need more permission than that. But they need to understand and know that they have permission to call you out if you drift. That they have permission to help you stay grounded. That's a tough one, especially if you start being successful, because your ego will get out of check. And they have to have permission to not let us coast in our comfort zones. Not let us get comfortable, but keep pushing us and sharpening us, just as we're going to push and we're going to sharpen them. Because here's the reality. Uninvited accountability rarely works. If somebody that you barely know comes up and starts challenging you on something, it's going to be a challenge. They're not holding you accountable, they're challenging you. And we're going to respond out of with that same passion or that same vigor to defend why we're doing what we're doing. But when you invite accountability, that creates freedom. That opens the door so people can come to you and you know that they have your best interest. And if you don't know and you can't believe they have your best interest, then for gosh sake, do not let them be in your inner circle. Accountability creates consistent checkpoints, because once you've got your circle, you create your rhythm. We talked about it last week. You don't just say, let's check in sometimes, because that's a recipe for neglect. Instead, you say, hey, we're going to have a monthly breakfast or a monthly call. We're going to have a shared Word doc or a journal that we track our growth with, right? However that works for you. But we're especially going to ask for that ad hoc feedback after big decisions or in seasons or during, not after. We're going to get their feedback as we're going through the process. And every meeting that you have, every time you have because these are very intentional meetings, right? So when the meeting is done, when the conversation is done, it will end with, how can I stay on track this month? And make it normal to reflect on that. Make it safe to be honest with one another. And make it regular enough that you're just going to catch any drifting before it becomes damage or becomes a habit. Because when you start developing that level of accountability in your circle and in yourself, it's going to build inner strength. Because here's one thing I've learned. The most successful leaders in the world aren't just the most talented. They're the most accountable. They stay grounded. They stay humbled. They stay protected. Why? Because they've built a system of honesty around them. They're honest with themselves. They pull honesty around them. They live the values. They breathe the values. They're grounded in the values, the core values that hold them true, those things they say they're not going to compromise, and they have their team help hold them to that. And on the days that they don't feel strong, they have a circle that reminds them of who they are and calls them up to who they're becoming, right? Because that's what your friends are doing. You know, the Bible says even God calls those things that are not as though they are. And that's what we do. You may not be the CEO yet, but I see you becoming the CEO. You may not be that strong voice yet, but I see you becoming that strong voice. And I'm going to speak to you as that strong voice. And I'm going to call you up to that level. Because who you are right now is not who you're going to be. It's not who you're going to become. But your decisions today will decide who that is. So make the wise decisions. So here's some pretty practical steps, some things to help with accountability, right? Some takeaways. First, identify 1 to 3 trusted people who can be part of your accountability circle. 1 to 3. One's typically not enough, but get more than that. But it has to be people who love you enough to challenge you. Have to be people that you will open yourself with and who know you or can get to know you. 2, schedule a rhythm of connection. It doesn't matter if it's monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, text, coffees, calendar, however it may be. Something that allows you to get rhythm going. 3, be very clear about your needs. This is where I tend to drift. How can I check in? Or this is what I need to do to check in, and this is how I prefer feedback. Communication has to be very clear. And it has to be reciprocal. Accountability is a two-way street. If somebody can hold you accountable, but you can't speak back to them, that's not a healthy relationship. You have to be as committed to their growth, and it takes strength for you to give it, just it takes strength for them to receive it. But you have to be as committed to their growth as they are to yours. And then 5, reflect. Reflect on a regular basis. Ask yourself, am I leading in isolation? Am I inviting insight? Who do I have around me? Who can I trust? Because if you can't trust anyone, then you need to dig deep inside yourself, because that's a issue within you. And you've got to dig down and find out why you can't trust anyone. Because there's people there that care for you. There's people that want your best. But you have to open the door and let them in. You can do it. I know you can do it. So just remember, we weren't meant to lead alone. We weren't meant to carry the pressure without support. And above all, you weren't meant to drift in silence and then crash in shame. So invite accountability. Let people call you out and call you up, because the best leaders don't just chase growth. They guard their growth. Because you can't lead well without alignment, and you can't live whole without people who love you enough to speak the truth. So if you want more tools to help you grow in alignment and leadership, check out Lead Well, Live Whole, and Legal Leadership. Both of these books are available on Amazon and through Sweet Dreams Publishing. But this is Michael Sirmon reminding you to lead strong, but not solo. Invite accountability and lead well. See you next time on Lead Well, Live Whole.
Thanks for joining us on Lead Well, Live Whole. If this added value to your journey, share it with a friend and subscribe. Until next time, lead those you serve well and live your life whole.